Hey everybody, welcome to Fake Plastic Treefingers.
Welcome.
Welcome. I am John. This is Brannick right here.
What's up?
What's up? All right, in this episode, we're going to be discussing Radiohead's first album, Pablo Honey. So, sound good to you, Brannick?
Yeah, I've listened to this album a lot, and I think I'm ready to discuss it. So
Cool.
yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's we're going to start off. So as we do these album by album reviews of Radiohead's LPs, we're going to start off by, kind of presenting the basic facts about this album, right? So, and then we'll go into some discussion of like our own personal history, our memories, or impressions of this record at different times. And then we're going to go into talking about the tracks individually. So by the time we get through what is right now all 9 of Radiohead's main LPs, that's right?
Yeah,
nine LPs.
Hopefully
right?
we'll get a 10th one at some point soon, but we'll see.
For reals. Deliver, Radiohead. Come on. All right. Yeah. Right. We want it right at the time that we finish doing the 9th, right? That day. Mm-hmm. There we go.
Yeah.
Boom. That'd be awesome. All right. So yeah, so let's talk about Pablo Honey. So just the facts. Brannick, do you know what year Pablo Honey came out?
Yeah, it was 1993. I don't know the exact date, but it was in 1993. So
yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So according to Wikipedia, February 22nd, 1993.
So it turned like what it was.
Oh, it was pretty.
20,
yeah, it was
29 years old a couple not long ago. So yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy for me. 20. Yeah. I can't believe that record is 29 years old. All right. It was recorded September through November of 1992 at Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire and Courtyard Studios in Oxfordshire. And the producers were Sean Slade, Paul Q. Coldery, and Chris Hufford.
Yeah, so that's interesting because they didn't bring them back for any other albums, right?
I mean, I don't recognize those names certainly from any of the other Radiohead records. So, I'm scrolling forward here to see if any of those names come up, but I don't see them. So, and I mean, that kind of makes sense to me because I know that Nigel started working with them on the Bends, and he was their, he's been their guy ever since, right? So, so anyway, those 3 individuals, I'm just gonna, I don't know anything about them, but I'm just gonna click through on the links here. Sean Slade, born November 1957, worked at co-founded Boston's Fort Apache Studios. That's interesting. I've just been on a little bit of a Sebadoh kick here, and Sebadoh had recorded several things, I believe, at Fort Apache, so that's a little connection right there. But yeah, like Sean Slade worked with quite a few of these sort of early 90s alternative rock bands, some of the big names in the early 90s alternative rock scene: Hole, the Lemonheads, Juliana Hatfield, Morphine, love me some Morphine, Dinosaur Jr., Uncle Tupelo, the band. I love the band Morphine, not the drugs so much. I mean, I'm sure it's cool, but anyway. All right. So there's Sebadoh right there, where they worked with Sebadoh apparently. So yeah, that's cool. I guess I know these guys a little better than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like from this list right here that it's the people he produced for, give a very similar sound of what Pablo Honey is, like Pixies and Sebadoh. So
yeah, it has that. This record definitely has that sort of, it has that early 90s, alternative rock feel. I mean, that's, and it's maybe a little bit too much. So it leaves it feeling a little bit generic from that era for me. But anyway, that's the facts, background of this record. It's interesting that they were brought over there when they were, it appears they were really more part of the Boston music scene, but I guess they brought them over to the UK.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about some personal background before we dive in. Hey, this is really our first episode of this new podcast all about Radiohead, Fake Plastic Treefingers. Do us a favor and hit that like button, leave us a comment, hit that subscribe button on our channel, and And let's get the word out about this podcast, about this show, because we want to keep this thing going for a long time, make it extra awesome, make it all about Radiohead, and just do some cool stuff.
Yeah. And if you do that, one of these days we'll tackle the Smile album once it comes out.
Well,
so hopefully.
Indeed we shall. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we're gonna get it all. You're very excited about that Smile album, aren't
I
you?
am. Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounded pretty cool stuff. So
Yeah.
all right, so Brannick, do you want me to go first on like kind of personal background, memories of this record?
Yeah.
All right,
You heard it first, so
well, this indeed I did. So I remember it well. Actually, I don't really remember the first time I heard the actual record, but I remember hearing Creep. So I was born in 79, so I was like, probably, I guess I would have been 13 years old when I probably first heard Creep. I think I was probably in 7th grade at the time. And who can forget that video? Who can forget like that, just hearing the, this like kind of like nice, it's like evenly paced song, guys singing really nice, and then all of a sudden it's like, that was just the coolest thing, right? It was, I remember hearing that, and like just everybody loved it. I mean, it was crazy how that little thing caught on. And of course, this is on the, it's all coming on the trails of Smells Like Teen Spirit, right?
Yeah.
How that just transformed the popular culture like overnight. And so this felt like kind of a worthy successor to Smells Like Teen Spirit, right? Because it had kind of that similar, we'll do kind of a, nice, like simple, quiet part, more like kind of like melodic and quiet part. And then all of a sudden it's just like the storm hits, right? All of a sudden. So yeah. That's the thing I remember most about this, but I don't remember, I was not somebody who ran out and bought the record, right?
Yeah. And I feel like that's, I feel like it's kind of strange to me how Creep kind of blew up, because, I think if it had come out probably a couple of years later, it wouldn't have blown up because people just would have been tired of hearing the Smells Like Teen Spirit sort of thing. So it is really interesting and pretty good timing for this one to come out, right on the heels of Smells Like Teen Spirit, when people were wanting more, Yeah. So yeah.
It really makes me wonder if it was rushed to a certain degree, right? Rushed to get it out to, really capitalize on what was going on with with Nirvana at that time. I'm looking at Nevermind right now. So Nevermind came out in September of 1991. And of course, Smells Like Teen Spirit came out that same month. So, it was maybe you can kind of think about it like Nirvana just like over that next year just really like blew up, right? Just got humongous. And that every record label was like, we got to have the next Smells Like Teen Spirit. So you can see how they're like, let's get this record out. Here's this band. This guy Tom, he kind of has that Kurt Cobain vibe going on a little bit, but he's British, and let's get this record out there, right? Let's get this record. What's our Smells Like Teen Spirit? Creep. Yeah, that's got that like quiet thing, and then it's got the loud thing going on.
Yeah, and I think honestly Tom was trying to, maybe around like Pablo Honey, he was trying to get that Kurt Cobain look, because he kind of had like the longer blonde hair around that time, which is kind of interesting because like around the bends he kind of got rid of that and it's never come back. So yeah,
that's true. And I think that's probably for the best for him. I mean, it's anybody's guess. I'm not an expert on such things, but it's interesting to think, was he being pushed to kind of position himself like that at that time, because he's obviously grown, he obviously grew past that pretty quickly, and found his own niche. But yeah, it's interesting to think about like Radiohead in this era, like were they being positioned, were they being marketed to be this like next Nirvana? And I really look back on everything and I think undoubtedly they must have been, right? Just the impressions that they get, the way that the radio just like kept playing Creep over and over and over. But that was the problem. It was like there was Creep, and then at least in the US, that's it, right? Like
Yeah.
there, I don't remember even ever seeing another single, like another video for one of their songs. It was just like Creep. And then we'll do Creep on MTV Spring Break, which was like cringy.
Yeah.
So have you ever seen that, by the way?
I think I've seen parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, it's just, it feels so off because, uh, I don't know. It's just because, one, it's nothing like Radiohead, at all.
Hmm.
And like, yeah, it's weird to watch, because it feels like they wouldn't do that in a million years now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And, undoubtedly they wouldn't. Like, I mean, it's an entirely different band, and it's really interesting to see how, I mean, that's going to be one of the fun parts of doing this podcast is how much they've evolved over time, and kind of charting that progression and that evolution, and thinking about why they made the decisions that they made. So that is my biggest memory, and it's just funny to me that, like, here I am, I've been a huge Radiohead fan for really since 97 is the easiest place for me just to say when OK Computer came out. Humongous Radiohead fan. But going back to 90, I remember hearing Creep in 93, and then just hearing it and hearing it and hearing it and hearing it and hearing it until it was just like, I am sick of this band. And I'd only ever heard one song. Now
yeah.
I do remember people who had this record. I do remember like friends that had Pablo Honey, but I just had no interest in it. I can't remember who I was really into at the time, but it was just, it was one of those things where I liked this song initially, and it just got overplayed to the point of like, oh, just make it stop, please.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was my initial impression of this album, and that's what it was for definitely a couple of years. And in fact, I didn't even like give the Bends a second thought when, I don't even think I noticed it came out for a long time. So anyway, Brandon, like, tell us more about your first impressions. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean,
when you heard this and everything.
so like I heard this album like a couple years ago, for the first time when I had first started getting into Radiohead. And when I first listened to it, I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. And I started listening to it all the time.
Hmm.
Pretty much. I used to listen to this and the Bends on repeat. And over the years it's just kind of gotten annoying to me. I probably haven't listened to it in a year or two at this point. But yeah, so I mean, it wasn't, I listened to it a lot like a couple of years ago, and I just haven't listened to it much since.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and so we're, one of the things we're going to do with each of these albums is we'll share our initial impressions up front with you guys, like kind of our memories of it and everything. And then we're going to go back, we're going to talk about each of the songs, and then towards the end of each episode, we're going to give like kind of a current assessment, how we feel about it now, like looking back on it, as two big Radiohead fans. So all right, so shall we discuss the tracks now?
Yeah, I think we should.
All right, cool. All right, track one. So Brannick, what do you think about you?
Well, I mean, I think it's a pretty all right opener. Probably one of the more interesting tracks on the album. I really like the intro,
Mm-hmm.
with the guitar, and I think it's maybe I don't know what it is, but there's um like maybe a pan drum or whatever it's called, that syncs up with the guitar, and I've always thought that was a really cool touch to open up the album. And I also like how it how it kind of explodes after that. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a pretty cool opener actually. And it's interesting. I think you're more of a you've definitely been getting more into like the technical aspects of music, and like the
mhm.
all the effects and everything like that. And I think you can explain those sorts of things much better than I can. But it's interesting as I think about that initial guitar arpeggio. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
When I think about that initial guitar arpeggio, it reminds me of another later Radiohead song. And actually, there's probably a few we could call out, because I think that's kind of a common little thing they tend to use in some of their songs. Can you guess which one it reminds me of?
I'm gonna say Reckoner, maybe. Because that
Uh,
kind of has that guitar, similar guitar start. I feel like
no, not it's not Reckoner for me. I can see why you'd think that, but it's actually a B-side.
I'm not extremely familiar with all the B sides, so
Oh, okay. All right. So,
um,
all right, season 2, we're going to talk about all the B-sides
yeah,
for each album era. So, all right, it is lull. That's what I'm thinking of,
lol.
right?
Okay,
So you can you hear
yeah,
that, right?
yeah, I can.
Yeah, that's like anyway, that it just as I was listening to you again just a second ago, it popped into my head. That sounds a lot like the opening of lull. So anyway, yeah, really it's a pretty good opening track. Not necessarily their best because they've had some just amazing opening tracks.
Oh yeah,
But as far as like, it's worthy, it's a good you is a good song. A
yeah,
song I think that most bands would be proud of. So
yeah.
yeah.
All right, creep.
Creeps
Uh,
up next. Yeah.
yeah. So I think you already kind of gave your thoughts on this one.
Hmm.
And I kind of feel the same way. I've never been like super into this song. I mean, it's a catchy song.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really cool to hear the song explode in the chorus, but it's just kind of after hearing it a couple times, it just kind of gets irritating. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and it's one of those where it's the curse of being overplayed, right?
yeah,
So once you've heard it a million times, then you're just sick of it. But if you let it go and you come back to it every once in a while, you're like, oh, it's kind of a cool song. You need to come to a place where you hear it with fresh ears again, right?
yeah,
Where it doesn't just sound like the same thing over and over. I mean, that guitar, it really was a brilliant little thing, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's Johnny doing his Johnny thing right from the very
yeah,
beginning, right?
yeah. Johnny being Johnny, pretty much.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, just the juju. I mean, it's just very cool. And the thing I think we probably talked about this before, but uh, the crazy thing was that Creep was the first of like several several hit songs called Creep that came out
yeah,
like in like the span of one
yeah,
year.
and I feel like, I mean, obviously, "Creep" by Radiohead is the one that probably blew up the most. But I'd say, Stone Temple Pilots probably made a better "Creep" than
Mm.
Radiohead did. Even though I'm a much bigger Radiohead fan than a Stone Temple Pilots fan, I think I'd take Stone Temple Pilots "Creep" over Radiohead.
It's funny. I go back and I think about that Creep, and I really did not like Stone Temple Pilots when their first album came out. I have since then become I've definitely become a fan of Stone Temple Pilots, like looking back. But I was just like, this band is ripping off Pearl Jam,
Yeah,
from the like from the very beginning. Um, and and so I just thought, I was like, what is this? It's like it's the same name as this Radiohead song that came out, and and it definitely, so Radiohead's Creep came out on September 21st, 1992. When did it come out in the US? When did it become a big hit in the US? Let's see here. So, um, do, do, do. Creep was released as a single 21st September 1992. Initially received little airplay, and then late 1992, they got dissed by the UK press, and then uh, when Pablo Honey was released in 1993, it became a hit in Israel first. And says that's right. That's why they have this like this they always like they have such a huge fan base and a very devoted fan base in Israel. And I think they've always kind of had a heart for that fan base there. So and it began receiving airplay a little bit after that on the US radio station. So early 93 is really when that happened. Now, Stone Temple Pilots Creep was released in November of 1993. So that's when it became a hit. So yeah, and then the other one, and I don't even know if you've heard this one, Brannick, but I definitely remember this
yeah,
song, TLC Creep. I definitely remember this song, and it came out it was recorded in 93 and then came out in 94. So there was just something in the zeitgeist of the time that people love this idea of being a creep, I
Being a
guess.
creep, yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what. Yeah, I guess people just really like the creeps at that point.
Quick side note: have you ever heard any interesting covers of Creep?
I mean, I've never really
Radiohead's Creep.
yeah, I've never really listened to much covers. I mean, I've heard snippets of other ones that I feel like have done pretty good jobs. And
Mhm.
honestly, I really enjoy hearing like a stripped down version of it. You know, but I mean, not really any that I can think of off the top of my head that have like blown my mind. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, maybe we'll do one. Maybe we'll do an exploration of that at some point.
maybe.
If you guys like that idea, hit the like button, make a comment below. What are some cover versions of Creep that are particularly worthy that you know of? And also, like, what do you think about Creep? If you've been a Radiohead fan for a long time, what's your impression of Creep? What's your opinion of Creep at this point? Because it is, no matter, it will always just remain one of Radiohead's most iconic songs, right? Because it's the band that, it's the song that made them and almost destroyed them in the same heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any other thoughts on Creep before we move on to the next song? I'm sure we'll talk about Creep much more in future episodes of this
probably
podcast.
will. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I just don't really find much interesting about it. I mean, it's a catchy song and it's it's cool when it explodes, but other than that, I don't find it that great of a song. So yeah,
fair enough. All right, track 3. How do you?
Filler.
That's how we're gonna say about it. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm pretty sure that I've it's been a long time since I read a biography of Radiohead, but I remember reading 1 or 2 biographies back when back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and I believe that was their word on this track. It was just like, oh, we needed another track, so we came up with this one kind of on the spot, and we know it's garbage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, there's really not much to say about it other than it's filler.
Yeah.
So
let that be the final word for you, people. Filler. All right. Track 4, Stop Whispering.
Yeah, I mean, this song is I think it's a pretty cool song. I like it's a bit more of a quiet song as compared to all the other songs so far. And I also like towards the middle of the song where it just kind of breaks down. And it's mostly just guitar at that point. I think it's a pretty cool song, and it's probably one of the better tracks off of this album.
Yeah, for sure. And when I did finally go back and listen to Pablo Honey, when I became a big Radiohead fan several years later, this was definitely one of the songs that I latched onto from Pablo Honey. I thought it was a really great, really great song, really beautiful song. And my question for you, Brannick, is have you ever heard the like strings version of this song, or like the one
I haven't.
So there's a version of this song. It's still the same like rock song, but it's got like really lush strings in certain parts. It's really even more beautiful. It's like a really nice arrangement of the song. And I can't remember like where that came out and in what context that came out. I've got it somewhere. I can probably share it with you if you've never heard it before. I'll try to remember to link to that in the show notes on our YouTube channel there. So yeah, remember to check the show notes that are in the YouTube channel or in the YouTube notes for this video. And for those of you listening on the pod, on your various podcasts, remember to check those notes too. I'll try to remember to put that there. But yeah, Stop Whispering, I would say is one of the better tracks on the album for me. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first tracks I heard off of this album, and it made me want to check out the album more. So yeah.
All right, next up is Thinking About You.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this is the first time we hear Radiohead stripped down and just mostly use acoustic guitar. And honestly, I like it a lot. I mean, I think it's a pretty nice song. Definitely one of my favorites off the record. And and yeah, it's nice to hear them just kind of just hear the acoustic, and then yeah.
I mean, it's same for me. Like it's a really pretty song. It's it's kind of surprising to me, I guess, that there wasn't more of a push after Creep was such a big hit to make to make Thinking About You a big hit, because it feels like, a lot of, like, I think about like Smashing Pumpkins, right? Another band that got really big around this time, right? Uh they were actually maybe a year later, but they or no, maybe it was around this time. Anyway, same era, early 90s. They put out like Cherub Rock, and then Today was a big hit, and then they come out with Disarm, which is kind of like that, more, not exactly quiet, but it's more like introspective, acoustic.
Yeah.
Has that, like kind of, man, this is their deep song kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Going on. So I'm surprised that there wasn't more of a push, and because I have to think, if there had been a push, it would have been a hit, because
Yeah, and I think it would have been, interesting to I think it could give people a much different perspective on Radiohead just to
Mhm.
hear, because something, stripped down after Creep to show, two sides of Radiohead, hear the, you know, uh to hear the hard rock grunge of Creep and then just a acoustic song. And I think that would have been a really interesting market plan and would make people more interested to hear the album. So
Yeah, yeah, it's it's a beautiful song, and it's, you look back and it's like, it's too bad that it didn't have whatever push. It really is like, it just makes me think about like how, what a mystery this album is, right? Because it does have other songs, like other really good songs other than Creep, that really, you're like, if Creep was such a big hit, how were some of these other songs not hits as well? um Now, again, we're talking about this from the American perspective. The truth is that in the UK, other songs, I think other songs off of Pablo Honey were actually were actually somewhat popular.
mhm.
And they were they were big in the UK even after Pablo Honey. So it's an interesting story of an interesting juxtaposition between their UK popularity and their US popularity, and kind of their story of fame in both those regards. So, and hey, if you are a UK fan, UK Radiohead fan, listening to this podcast or watching us on YouTube, drop us a note, say hey in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. All right. So, uh, next up,
Anyone can play guitar.
anyone can play guitar. Yeah,
It's true.
it is true. Yes. Um, there's people out there who have tried before and they're like, no, it's not. Anyway, so Brandon, what are your thoughts on Anyone Can Play Guitar?
I mean, yeah, I think it's a pretty great song. And it was the follow up to Creep, right? I'm pretty sure it's a single that came out after Creep.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I think it's a really catchy song, and it's always been one of my favorites, pretty much ever since I listened to the album. And yeah, it's also I never knew that Tom wanted to be Jim Morrison, but
That's what he says. He wants
yep,
to be Jim Morrison.
yeah,
Um, yeah, very, huge rock song, another huge rock song. It has a cool, like, I really dig the bass line on this one.
yeah. The bass line is pretty great.
Good work by Colin. Um, so, this is one where it again, interesting. Like, I look at their singles, the way their singles were timed, and this is at least according to Wikipedia. But you had Creep, and then you had Anyone Can Play Guitar, and then I think it was after, and then I think Creep came back around and was a hit after they released Anyone Can Play Guitar. um and and that just gets me thinking, like, it was that maybe they envisioned a different sequence for this initially, but then Creep became a hit after they intended it to become a hit, and it was almost kind of like, we're just going to ride this Creep thing for a while. And then I look, and it's like Creep, Anyone, and so maybe they're like, well, Creep's already a big hit, we can't really put Anyone Can Play Guitar out now because it's already, like, we already have the big rock song. And then next up is Pop Is Dead, and I'm like, oh goodness, like, maybe that was the problem, right? Maybe it was the problem that Pop Is Dead came came next in the in the singles order for them, but
I think it's just a, it's just a problem that Pop is Dead was, you know,
it was even released.
it even exists.
It even
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, just it's that whole era is very mysterious. It's a wonder that Radiohead came out of it intact, right? And that they were
Mhm.
actually able to move on to making the bends.
Yeah, they were able to move past Pop is Dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm a fan. Anyone Can Play Guitar, one of the better songs on the album for me.
Yeah.
Ripcord. What do you think of Ripcord?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this probably falls in the same boat as How Do You. I feel like it's kind of filler.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all that memorable. You know, I just it's even though I've listened to this album a bunch, I feel like this is one of the tracks I forget the most. And yeah, I don't find it that interesting. Yeah.
I got to be honest. I mean, like every other song on this album, I can come up with and I can name, like I can hum it, including How Do You, right? If you like, you're just like John, hum How Do You, I can do that, right? At least like the chorus, right? Um, Ripcord, I'm like, how does that one go again? It must
Yeah,
be just, I think it's just super forgettable.
it is.
Again, another track that's just not much going on here. And and gosh, for a band that just was so is so went on to be so particular about its music, I it just seems increasingly clear to me as when we look back on Pablo Honey how it was a this was a band that was maybe not quite there yet, but they were getting pushed because the music their record label wanted to capitalize. Like maybe they actually should have taken some more time to develop them before they just pushed them out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, yeah, they definitely need more time to just actually learn what they wanted to do. I mean, you can obviously see that later on, even on the next album, they obviously know what they want to do in a way. Whereas, songs like this make it seem like they're just kind of like, let's just make a song.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like this should have been a really good EP, with
Yeah.
like 6 or 7 songs on it.
Yeah, definitely.
So and then if maybe you combine that with the My Iron Lung EP, you have like a really good first album or something
Yeah.
like
I
that.
mean, you definitely would.
Um I mean, I just go through and it's all very like there's not a lot of dimensionality to to the music on this record. You know what I mean by that? Like
There's
just
just kind of it's one dimension. There's nothing on the other side, pretty much.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
feels very like with yeah, there's some like quieter songs and everything, but it's like we don't get much like it's like they were trying to put forth personality, but we don't really get much of the actual Radiohead personality. It's like they were still trying to figure it out,
Yeah,
right?
they weren't really sure what they were gonna do.
Yeah, I mean, what are like in your mind, like what are some great like debut records, right? By bands
Well,
that like to just come out and it's like this is a fantastic debut record.
I mean, the ones that first come to mind are, Weezer's debut is a classic, and
Yeah,
they obviously knew what they wanted to
that
do.
came out around this time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think Bjork's debut album is pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say it's her best by a pretty large margin, but I mean, it's still a pretty great debut.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there are a bunch of other great, debut albums from the 90s that came out. So
Yeah. Well, I think of like Vampire Weekend, right? Like
yeah.
that they just that record is so good. The first one, REM's first record, Murmur,
hmm
really good. So and like they're interesting too. Like they're records that are just really interesting. And Pablo Honey just incredibly just does not do that for him. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on to so Ripcord. We're both giving it kind of a not so much,
Yeah.
very forgettable.
Yeah.
All right, Vegetable.
Yeah, I mean, Vegetable, I feel like is kind of in the same as Ripcord. I mean, I definitely say it's a better song than Ripcord, but I just feel like I don't remember this one too much. I mean, it's it's a better track than Ripcord and probably How Do You, but I mean, I don't really think it's all that memorable, and I don't think I would I don't really come back to it.
Yeah.
Beside the
I
album.
mean, I'm there with you. And the funny thing for me is that I think I actually get Vegetable and Prove Yourself like mixed up like from time to time because I feel like they're almost like they feel like the same song to me. It's like we reached this point in Pablo Honey where it's just kind of like, okay, where we're just, kind of plugging along, maybe until we get to our last couple of good songs, for this for this
Yeah.
record. I'm gonna hold those to the end. But yeah, Vegetable. I mean, you go from, I think you go from like Stop Whispering, Thinking About You, Anyone Can Play Guitar. It's like those are like that is the pinnacle of this record. Those three tracks, very good, back to back to back. And then you hit Ripcord, Vegetable, and it's like, wow, things really like
They just kind of
just dropped off. Yeah, just crashed.
yeah.
What about Prove Yourself? What do you think of Prove Yourself?
Prove Yourself. I mean, I definitely say it's a step up from both the last two tracks. And wasn't it a bit of a hit maybe outside of the US in a way for fans of the album? It was one of the more popular songs, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it was. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I come back to. It again, it's so interesting because Radiohead is a very international band. I am speaking of it from someone who kind of became a fan of theirs in the US from a US perspective around when basically the day OK Computer came out. And so that's my perspective on them. And that, so it's, for me, it's like, I remember Creep and liking that song at first, and then being like, I just wish this band would go away. And then my buddy really liked the Bends, and he was like, you should listen to this album. I know it's Radiohead, but like give it a second chance. And I was like, this album's fantastic. OK Computer comes out, loved it. But like then songs like I hear that like Prove Yourself, I was like actually kind of a hit, or it was intended to be a hit somewhere. It was like considered one of their better songs, from early on. And it's just interesting to hear these different international perspectives on how they were marketed or what songs were actually important at other places.
Yeah, and I feel like on that same note about like other albums that they would make, like if you were to play me something off of like OK Computer and be like, and then play me like something off of this album, I think I would have trouble figuring out if it was the same band.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only way I think I would be able to is just because of Tom's voice. But even then, it's not all that recognizable right now.
It's true. It's true.
So yeah, I mean, Prove Yourself is a fine song, but it's still not the best one so far.
Yeah. All right. So and that's, I'd agree. It's like, to me, they may have thought it was a hit, but not so much. I mean, it's not one. I wouldn't put it in one of the better tracks on the record for me. Yeah. I Can't. What do you think of I Can't?
I Can't. So I think this one's a pretty catchy song. And it's definitely one of the more lighthearted songs on the album. And I feel like it's a bit more stripped down than the last couple songs. It's a much more calmer track, and I actually enjoy it a lot. I think it's a pretty good track. It's kind of fun to hear it just kind of like drop out at the end, and then it comes back, comes roaring back. So I mean, yeah, I think it's a pretty good track. Yeah,
I would agree. I feel like I've seen a lot of people diss this track in the past or say it's just filler, but I think this is actually one of the better songs on Pablo Honey. It's got a nice melody. I wouldn't say it's the best or anything like that, but I'd probably put it in the top half if I was ranking all of the tracks on the record. So I just think it has a really like nice melody, memorable melody, and it's a decent song, one I appreciate. So
yeah, definitely.
Lurgee.
Yeah. Lurgee. I think this one is a pretty great track. I think it's I mean, I feel like it's kind of interesting in the way that it's a really good track, but at the same time, there's not really much to say about it. I mean, it's a pretty chill song, and it's a really nice song. It's a really pretty song. But to be honest, I don't find all that much to say about it. Other than that, it's a really great track.
Yeah, I this is one that I feel like is sort of a sleeper. You don't expect it. You're not expecting much by this point in the record because quite honestly, like you hit Ripcord, Vegetable, and Prove Yourself, and you're just like, well, this record got boring pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't. You're like, all right, it's all right, I guess. It's a little better than the last few. And then you hit Lurgee, and it's pretty slow, and but it's really man, there was a point at which this was like one of my favorite Radiohead songs.
Yeah.
It's just a really pretty song, and I'm not sure the right way to describe it, but it's a real change of pace, both in like in the style of the song. Instead of it just being like, here's another rock song for you.
Yeah.
It's like they're starting to do something a little different here, right? They're starting to, branch out in terms of like the kinds of songs they're willing to write, and doing things that are a little bit more unorthodox. It's still not Kid A style experimentation, but it's a different sort of song from most of the rest of the songs on this record.
Yeah.
And it's got a nice melody. And, in a way, it reminds me of like this kind of stuff Tom would do later on, where it's, his vocals are more like, they're less direct. They're more just kind of like impressionistic. For example, like, How I Made My Millions. Do you know that
Yeah.
B-side?
Yeah.
He's basically just like playing while somebody's doing the dishes in the background. He's playing piano and just kind of like making up words as he goes along. It's like a pretty melody. And that's, to me, like Lurgee reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think the song actually is kind of like where Radiohead found their true identity. Because out of all these songs on the album so far, I feel like you can't really find anything else besides on this album, like anything that they've made that sounds anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like they've written songs similar to Lurgee, at least on the bends and probably even further. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like where they kind of found what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we hit Blowout. What do you think of Blowout?
I think it's a pretty great closing track. It's it's not on the same level as like a videotape or anything, but
Or Street Spirit.
Or Street Spirit, definitely. But I think it's kind of the one of the only tracks on this album where I feel like they're all kind of playing together,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're all, joining together and actually writing a song that all of them, like participated in,
Yeah, it's a cool one. It's definitely I think one thing that came out of Pablo Honey that was maybe good from an overall album experience was that we quickly see that Radiohead knows how to close out a record, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like knows how to finish a record the right way. And not all bands do. Not all bands are good at this. But for a record to be, I think, a truly like great like listening experience, you got to have an awesome final track. And from the outset, they've been pretty good at that, right? You think about Street Spirit, fantastic. The Tourist, really good. Motion picture soundtrack, great song.
True Love Waits.
Life in a Glass House. All, like they're just really good at like kind of making that final statement. And Blowout is a good one. I mean, it's about the best one I can imagine them making at this point, given the rest of the record, right?
Yeah.
It really like brings things back full bore. That after the first side was like kind of they got their best stuff out on the first side. It's like Blowout. I feel like Lurgee like kind of lulls you a little bit, and then Blowout's just like, all right, here we go, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic way to finish.
Yeah.
So cool track.
Definitely a great closer.
Yeah.
And it after a whole album that kind of shows like, they don't know what they're doing. I feel like it's really cool to see them. They actually know how to do something, and they definitely they already know what they want to do with they know what they want to do with the closing tracks. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Brannick, what is your current assessment of Pablo Honey?
Yeah, I mean, Pablo Honey, I mean, I'm gonna say I think it's a bit overhated. I don't think it's as terrible as a lot of people say it is. Um, but it's still not very great. I mean, I think I'd say like it's kind of half and half for me. I think half the tracks are really good,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other half is just kind of boring. But I mean, all in all, not a terrible album, but just nowhere near as good as the stuff they'd go on to make. Um,
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I mean, I I don't really go back and listen to Pablo Honey that much.
yeah,
And I think that's probably true of a lot of Radiohead fans. That the output they've had since then has just been so phenomenal. And like I was saying, to me, this record feels like um it's a band that was almost ready to be a huge band, but they were maybe being pushed too much, right? They
yeah,
they still had some work to do. And I wonder, I truly want, and here's the thing, here's the funny thing to me. I feel like there's actually some B-sides from this era that are better songs than some of the songs that got included on this record. So I think
yeah,
between like, I think the first half, if you just like basically you take the first side of the record, the first six songs, get rid of How Do You and throw in Blowout, right? You would actually have a pretty good like EP.
yeah.
You could even like think of it as like, with the Pixies, their first EP was Come On Pilgrim, and actually Radiohead, kind of got compared to the Pixies in some ways,
Hmm.
because of the like kind of quiet, screamy, vocals, in the same way Nirvana got compared to him. But Come On Pilgrim, 8-song EP. I think you could have made a pretty good 8-song EP out of this between You, Creep, Stop Whispering, Thinking About You, Anyone Can Play Guitar, I Can't, Lurgee, and Blowout. Or maybe you put a B side or something, take a couple of the B sides from this era and put them in there as well. Um,
Hmm.
but it's that second half is just pretty bad until you get to
Yeah,
the last couple of tracks. So,
yeah,
it just
yeah.
really brings it down.
Yeah, I mean, it can be pretty tough to get through that 3 songs, at least that 2-song stretch of Ripcord and Vegetable, and, it can be tough to get through Prove Yourself as well.
Yeah.
So,
And it's just a band that to me didn't have much of an identity yet. They hadn't really established what their identity was. Other aside from being the band that it's like we go from really quiet to really loud, and our singer can sing really nice, right?
yeah,
And he's kind of like a British Kurt Cobain. You can just see like the
yeah,
record label pushing that kind of stuff. And yeah, God bless these boys. They had to escape out from under that, right? They had
mhm,
to find a way out from under the weight of all of that and to just being who they really were. So
mhm,
it's an interesting kind of interesting to look back on that and think about them in this era and how far they came. So Brannick, what's your favorite song on here and why?
it can be kinda tough for me to choose, one favorite song just because there are a couple tracks on here that I think are really great Radiohead songs, but I'd say I'd have to go with, either Anyone Can Play Guitar or Lurgy.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Lurgy, but, yeah, and, I mean, I really love hearing, after, most of the album besides Thinking About You just kind of pummeling you, and it can get kind of annoying, after they've been pummeling you for a while, just to hear them strip down and, make this really nice song, towards the end of the album. I think it's a really great track. So,
Cool. Yeah, a little out of left field there with Lurgy. I'd go with Blowout. I think it's the most memorable song for me. I think it's the song that even still to this day feels like it belongs. It can find a way into their set lists. And I think it's like it actually sounds kind of like, okay, this is the band that was going to make the bends, right? This
mhm,
they saved their best for last on their debut, and and then this band was going to launch into something much greater on their next record, right?
mhm,
So I'd go with Blowout as my favorite. I'd probably say Stop Whispering is a second favorite. So
yeah,
yeah, but hey, if you're listening, what are your favorites? So if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know your favorite track on the record. Let us know your thoughts on the record. You think we're crazy and that Pablo Honey is one of the greatest records of all time? tell us
Yeah,
why,
tell us.
right? Tell us why. We love that kind of conversation. That's what we're here for. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for the, for this channel. And then for those of you listening, for right now, head on over to YouTube. We're also going to be setting up email, but I don't have that with me as we're recording this episode. So I'll add that into the audio once that's ready to go. All right, Brannick. So I guess that leaves us done with Pablo Honey and coming to the bins next.
Yep. We're out of Pablo Honey now. So we'll be going on to something a little better now.
Before we got into recording Pablo this episode, we were both kind of like, all right, I guess we got to talk about Pablo Honey before we get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
So, but that is our solemn duty as is making this encyclopedic Radiohead podcast. So had to do it.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we will talk at you next time.
See ya.